Your sport is over. Your purpose is not. You are made for more. Hi, I'm Brett Bullard, and this is the Former Athlete Fitness Podcast. What is going on, guys? Episode 6 of the Former Athlete Fitness Podcast. Today, we got a guest hailing from Canada. It's Mike Larusso. A little bit about Mike. YouTube content creator, creates motivational content, lifestyle content, tech tips. I know that I can take some tech tips from Mike because my tech tips or my tech life is horrible. A little bit more about Mike. He is an umpire in Canada. Also, he has competed in the 2020 HM Film Festival and has recently submitted an application to join the Canadian Forces. Mike, how are you, brother?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for being here today, man.
Yeah, not a problem.
Awesome, dude. Well, so we put it out there this past week that today's topic was going to be identity crisis post sports. And so I met Mike back in Myrtle Beach in 2019. Is that right, Mike?
Yep, October 2019.
That's right. October 2019 at the Myrtle Beach umpire camp. And me and Mike have just kind of stayed connected since then. And, I just know that he's going to provide a lot of cool insight and value for you guys today on this topic of identity crisis post sports. So, Mike, just share a little bit about yourself and background with sports, whether it was playing or umpiring.
Yeah, of course. So growing up, I was a baseball player, hockey player, not super high levels for each, but baseball was definitely more competitive than hockey ever was. Hockey was never going to go anywhere. Played for about 8 years. And when I got to grade 9, I came across some obstacles with baseball where I'd injured my shoulder. Rotator cuff, stupid injury. Just overthinking everything, a lot of wrong processes with pitching. And it came down to evaluating a lot of things of, can I still play after rehabbing from this injury? And at a competitive level, the answer to that was no. So that was basically the end of baseball. I was still playing hockey a little bit, but that I wasn't competitive at. So after grade 9, I stopped that too. Just wasn't going to go anywhere. So I was wasting my time more than anything. And after pretty much combined 14 to 15 years of athletics, either on the field, on the ice, training all the time, you go from so many hours a week of doing that to nothing at all. And the thing you once identified with 100%, you realize you can't anymore. Mm-hmm. And that was frightening.
So, how long would you say that that took a toll on you? Because I know I can speak from personal experience. I was fortunate enough to play through college, but I was kind of hanging on to the pass through, and I've mentioned this before, through like men's league and stuff, but not quite the same. And of course, I went through some injuries and just that temporary sitting out even toyed with my, my psyche. So how did that play a part in, you were just a teenager when this happened. So how did that play a part in the development of, your growth?
Well, going into high school, I was still at the point of like, I'm an athlete. It's what I do. It's who I am. And then I got hurt and I was out of it for a couple of years, 2-3 years. And it just dawned on me, like, shit, that's not who I am anymore. I can't just say, yeah, I'm going to practice or I'm playing tonight, because I'm not. And then got to senior year of high school. And just before I went off to college, I went and talked to my chiropractor, because he was like my main almost therapist, like athletic therapist, almost through all the years of rehab and everything. I went to him and I said, what do you think of beer league? Like a men's recreational baseball league. And he's like, how's your shoulder feeling? I was like, I haven't had any issues with it in 2 to 3 years. Like I've been off the field. He goes, well, give it a try, but it's going to be nothing more than a rec league. I was like, okay, that's a fair point. So I played for 1 season, and a bunch of guys who had moved on from competitive baseball. And we ended up winning that men's league championship. And at that point, end of the summer, August, September, won that championship. And I was like, you know what? I think I can end on that. I think that can be the end of my attempt at being an athlete again.
So that kind of gave you the closure that you needed, you think?
No. It gave me a positive ending to that part of my life.
Okay.
Because then it was college, and in college I had no time for athletics whatsoever. I was not focused on that. I was focused on getting through and finishing college, not quitting on it.
Right. Well, and I wanted to kind of transition into, how do athletes regain a sense of purpose after being detached from their sport? But you said something about identity, and since that's the topic of today, we talked about this book earlier, The Art of Not Giving an F, and the premise of that book, and guys, for you listening, I don't know if you ever heard of this book. If you have, it's a pretty cool read. I don't necessarily know if I agree with everything that's in that book, but it's definitely an interesting take. And so, Mike and I were talking about it a little bit earlier, but The Art of Not Giving an F, it's basically a premise about in order to kind of have this ease of life, this ease of anxiety, you remove yourself and your identity from something that you would do. And instead of the identity being the reason that you're doing that, it's more so of, I'm just doing this because it's a good thing. So, example, you wake up in the morning and you work out, and then there's this emotional attachment if you allow it to be. But then in the subtle art of not giving an F, or the art of not giving an F, the author talks about, well, you just get up because it's a good thing to do. You work out because it's a good thing to do. So, Mike, what's your take on that, man? Because, I'm kind of torn, because I get it. Like, you want to lessen your anxiety about things, but at the same token, like, I feel like you have to have some emotion and drive to move forward.
Absolutely, you do. But it's such a challenge, because my thing when I went to college was finding like the career path and finding the next thing that would define me. And so by the time I got to my second year, and up here with college programs, they're 2 years, and then university's 4 typically. So I got near the end of my second year. I had been like working as an intern essentially for our local cable TV station, and also working with our partner university doing all their video coverage for their online streams of all their athletics. So I was involved some way in that, and then working the junior hockey program as well, doing in-house entertainment with them. So there was a lot of video input.
Mm.
And with that, I was like, okay, I think I found that next defining purpose. And, I was getting through school, and near the end, I'm like, okay, like, I know who I am again.
Mm-hmm.
I found something I have a purpose for. That didn't last. Well, no, it didn't last, because I finished school, and they give you this notion, and this is why I actually hate colleges for the most part. They give you this idea that you're going to finish school and you're going to have a job right away.
Right.
And that's far from the truth,
mm-hmm.
because I finished, and at the end of my last internship, I basically got to my last day of my internship, and I felt good. I was like, they're going to hire me. I'm going to stick with this. Like, they're going to keep me on, and I'm going to stay here for a while. And I got to my last day, and they're like, so thanks for all your hard work. See ya. And I was like, well, fuck. Like, I'm back to the unemployment line.
So where would you think that you, like, what, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much emotion, how much passion did you put into that work while you were doing that?
I, like, everything. I ate, slept, and breathed it basically the whole way through. I thought, like, that was it. That was the thing that would keep me going for a while. And that's when the identity crisis hit again, because as soon as they say, yeah, we're not keeping you here, and you're back to the unemployment line, I'm like, well, back to rock bottom again? Is that what this is?
Mm-hmm.
And when I was going into college, just before I went into college, I was working at the infamous Tim Hortons coffee shop, and that was, it is such a hell on earth job.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dead end hell on earth job. So the thing was, they basically, for my internship, they let me go at the end of it, and the only thing I knew at that point, I was like, well, I know where I can get a job, at least to be paying the bills.
Right.
And I went back for, I think it was maybe 3 weeks, because I had done one season of umpiring in grade 11. I was like 17, and I needed a job at that point. So that was trying to reconnect me with baseball again.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't, at the time, it wasn't like a passion. It wasn't something I had like a high interest in. It was just, you know what, I can stay involved in the game and make a little bit of money. So I had gone into that. And then when I was working at Tim Hortons, I was like, you know what, maybe I'll give that another try. So I called my old assigner, and he was like, yeah, of course, come back. So after that 3 weeks at Tim Hortons, he was like, I can give you as many games as you want for the rest of the summer. And I was like, cool, quit Tim Hortons. I was like, I'm done here. Can't do it because I've got a promising other job.
Right.
And then at the time, I had a good buddy of mine who I actually don't even speak to anymore. He was working at Lids, the hat store. And with baseball only being seasonal, it came to like August, September, and he's like, so you want a job here? And I'm like, I'm about to be out of a job again. So yeah. And I got trapped in there for a little bit. And I was like, shit, I don't want to stay here that long. I don't want to get trapped with everyone else. Because a lot of the people who had got into that job, a lot of them are still there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I feel bad, but at the same time, I don't, because I got out. And it's such a horrible mentality. But like, as soon as I was there like a few months, and I had gone from like working 20 hours a week to 40 hours a week in a month. And all of a sudden, it's like December of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And I got really, really lucky, because one of the guys that I was an intern for at the old TV station, he had just had a kid. So they were looking for someone to cover for him for a 6-month period.
Right.
For a paid position. And I was like, okay, this is the sign of getting back to what I was meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
So they called me, and they're like, let's do an interview, basically a formality, but we got to do it, and then come on up. So I went up, worked for 6 months, and right at the time of, like near the end of my contract, there was a timing thing that almost worked out. There was a guy that worked for the competitor station. I'm not throwing any names out just because I'm still somewhat involved in the business. But the competitor station, a guy I knew and worked alongside, was leaving because he was going out further west to join another division of their company. And I was like, oh, I'm going to apply for his job, because that'll be my way to stay in.
Right.
And it was me and I think two other candidates for that job, and one of the other ones got hired. I was like, well, I'm back out of this again. And I, at that point, turned to umpiring, because I was like, well, I've done this. Let's see if there's more to offer. And the assigner I had worked for the previous summer I called him because I remember he had mentioned umpire school because he had gone years back, like back before Hunter Wendelstead took over the school, and it was still Harry's. So I called him. I was like, "Hey, I remember you mentioning something about umpire school. Tell me more about it." He's like, "Yeah, I went back whenever, I think it was like the 70s or something. It'll really improve your ability as an umpire, and I think it'll be good for your confidence too." I was like, "Perfect." So I went through all the paperwork, visa application, all of that, because coming from across the border, you need all that extra crap. And that's when I took it more seriously. And I thought that was my next defining purpose. That was my next calling and something to redefine my identity again.
Right.
So didn't get a job in the minor leagues, obviously.
Right.
Hard to do. The guys who do it are incredible. So I came home and, signed here again to take on even more games. I was doing baseball and softball. Like, incredible year. I was working I think I worked close to 100 games in a matter of 4 or 5 months.
Whoa.
That was amazing. Like, so much experience, like, really improved, worked on rotations, worked on mechanics, just the craft as a whole got so much better.
Right.
And I was going to go back for 2020. I was going to go back, but I was going to go to the academy. And my visa application got delayed. So I didn't get to that in time. I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll stick it out here, do some clinics, and try again for 2021. So I stuck out some clinics in January of 2020 here. And actually, one of the guys that was helping run the clinic was a AAA umpire. A guy named Chris Marco. I'm dropping his name because he's and he was basically a mentor for that whole month. And he was like, "Okay, I'm going to help you here because I know you're trying to get back to umpire school."
Right.
I was like, awesome. So I'm taking all like this mentorship from him. He's just improving like small things with my mechanics and everything. And I was like, I'm ready for this season. I'm ready to work. Boom. COVID-19. It's a thing.
Yeah.
And immediately my assignment, I was like, so what does that mean for this season? He was like, well, there is no season. They're closing everything down for the year. I was like, this is not going to work well for me next year, going back to umpire school.
Right.
And so that whole season, 2020, I got no games at all. I had the one clinic in January for like a month, and that was it. So I was like, well, guess I'm not going to umpire school in 2021 either. But I remained like positive. I was like, at least we're probably going to have a season in 2021 at least. So I can get back on the field then. Got an email from my assigner early this year. Season's being canceled again. I'm going like, shit, I'm not catching up here. So at that point, it's back to rock bottom again.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, there's going to be a lot of soul searching going on. There's going to be a lot of analyzing what the next step is. I know where my passions are, and I know where I can find something to commit to.
Right. So, you got this, I've been told, and I agree with the statement that personal growth is never linear. And so just the description that you've just talked about most certainly is not linear. It's gone up and down. Let's just touch back real quick on the internship that you did, and how can you compare that of being let go to your injury in high school?
I almost feel like they're completely different things in a sense, because the injury was preventing me from improving, where with my internship, I felt like I was improving every single day and getting better.
Right.
And at the end of the day, their reasoning was that they didn't have the funding to pay me at full time.
So the uncontrollable was in somebody else's hands, whereas the injury was the uncontrollable in no one's hands. It was just a shitty situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a horrible situation.
And then
that's one of those things where you can't stress over the things you can't control.
Right.
And the things that you can control, you have to do your best to change them when possible. But yeah, the things that you can't control, I've learned at this point, let those things go.
Right.
Because no matter what you do, you can't change that.
Well, and you even touch on the COVID thing. So you're feeling good about umpiring, and then COVID-19 happens, and then but I mean just from watching some of your content, Mike, I mean you've got to do a lot more creating, even in that quarantine months than you normally would have. So I mean, do you find gratitude in that fact? Had COVID not happened, do you think that you would have been able to showcase your talents, as a YouTube creator? Like, where are you on that?
You know what? I think with that, it provided me a little more timing to focus on that, but at the same time, a restriction of being limited to where I could go to create content. Like, I was in the confines of my office.
Right.
Because everything was closing down. It's not like I could go and eat somewhere or go and to like an open park because everything was closed down. It's like, well, I got nothing here at this point. But it made me kind of search deeper and find new creative abilities. And even if it was like the worst thing I've ever done, it was like, you know what? It's something. And I'm ahead of people who gave up because of the situation they were put in.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was admirable.
And I mean, I think that's admirable because, I think a lot of people in that time, and rightfully so, it's a very tough time. A lot of people mentally struggled. And I can't say that, I haven't had any mental struggles in the past year. I think I'd say a good majority have. But the fact of showing up and keep going is super inspiring. So, I mean, but let's just talk about, so, of course, we have these roadblocks, Mike. You had all these roadblocks, but let's talk about some pro athletes that seemingly had everything going for them, and they kind of messed up their own situation. And why do they do that? And so the couple of examples that I'm thinking of is, Mike Tyson, John Daly. Like, these are guys that made bukus of money, and then once they were over, they just kind of worked themselves into a hole. So, their sport's over, and how do they bounce back? Like, why did this happen? Why does this happen to some athletes?
Well, I mean, I'm the type of person when it comes to those guys where I can place blame on them because they made a choice. But at the same time, understanding the mentality that when you do something for 20, 30 years and it's all you've done, it's all you've known, they really struggle because all of a sudden they can't do it anymore. But you look at a guy like Mike Tyson, who ruined his own career from one stupid stunt. He got a bad reputation from the ear bite. I think that was the big thing for him. And that took him out of boxing. And at that point, what does he do with the rest of his life?
Right.
Sure, he's been in a couple movies, but there's a good argument to be made that if he didn't pull one stupid stunt, would he still be boxing? Would he have continued for even another 5 years?
Right.
Because ultimately he took himself out of it. Where a guy like John Daly, I think he just got into a depression when he stopped playing golf and turned to the wrong the wrong crutch, that being alcohol.
And I think that was already kind of grabbing at his foot as he was playing. I mean, the guy was just a sheer athlete. It was crazy. But yeah, once he stopped playing, that was a downward spiral for sure. And
I feel like that's a common thing with golf, though, because he's not the first one and certainly not the last to turn to that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, but on the other end, you got a guy, Shaquille O'Neal, who, I mean, that guy's he's a doctor, business guru. So what sets these guys apart? I mean, what is the driving factor? Like, how does one transition from their sport into the next endeavor while the other person is still stuck in that athlete identity?
I mean, Shaq is a very unique situation, I think, because in basketball, there's a lot of I want to say there's a lot of reckless behavior, but at the same time, the people he played with mainly were very influential people. He played most of his career with Kobe Bryant, who has been idolized by so many, who made so many right moves and so many right decisions in his career and then after as well. And I'm guessing, almost assuming, that he probably took some words of advice from Kobe over a period of time.
Sure.
Because when he stopped playing basketball, he had this huge following. He had this unbelievable fan base. And even though he physically could not compete anymore, he knew that he had the ability to influence others because he saw younger aspiring athletes, young kids who would look up to him, and realizing he had to keep giving that positive influence. And I mean, he had a couple of TV commercials too, which were kind of funny. But then with that ability of basketball, the knowledge of basketball, and having some speaking role on TV, he managed to get himself an analyst job as well to continue giving back and putting knowledge into the game to keep himself in it in a way. But then you look at the rest of his resume, I can't even comprehend how he's doing some of the stuff he does. Like he got his doctorate. He's also a cop with the Miami-Dade Police Department.
He's also a DJ. Did you know that?
I had an idea, but I wasn't sure he was actually serious about that.
Yeah, well, I think he kind of goes to these fast. So his DJ name's DJ Diesel, and he kind of he's just kind of like a hype man to open it up, and he has the setup. But I think he doesn't actually DJ. He just has the music going. And he's just a hype man.
Okay.
But yeah, it's impressive what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean he's still got a very positive influence. I remember seeing him on a roast. I forget which roast it was, but he's also a little bit of a comedian.
Oh yeah, very charismatic.
I mean, I saw him on a roast, and I'm like, okay, this guy's a leaping giant basketball player, but why is he on a roast? There's no way he can be funny. And he killed it, and I'm like, okay, this guy's got a lot more to him than. That's when I realized this guy's got a lot more to him than basketball.
Definitely a Renaissance dude.
He is a multi-dimensional person.
Well, and so interesting thing you said, and I'm just kind of comparing John Daly, Mike Tyson to Shaq. And the biggest thing that I heard, and tell me if if you disagree or agree, but the difference is that you talked about how Shaq is giving back and paying forward, whereas, and I'm not trying to, downplay any athlete here, but did you ever see that from the other two athletes that we just talked about? Was there a bigger purpose beyond themselves, or was Shaq recognized that there's opportunity beyond his playing days and he found a purpose bigger than himself, and that is why he's been so successful?
I think part of that influence is who he surrounded himself with too.
Sure. Because
you look at Mike Tyson, there's a lot of brain injury with boxing, and I hate to resort to that, but I mean, I don't know if he surrounded himself with people who were trying to hype him back up after his ridiculous stunt. And John Daly, I don't know if he had the proper support to not turn to alcohol after he stopped golfing. I don't know if he had I don't know if he went to rehab or if he went to any therapy or searched for something that would fill that new void in his life.
Sure.
And I think that's something important that they may have just missed the mark on.
Mm-hmm. So, how can we learn from this? Because, I mean, there's tons of former athletes out there listening that, are struggling, I'm sure, post-sport life. So, from your personal experience and you still continuing to, strive to have purpose beyond your sport, what advice can you give to any former athlete to regain a sense of purpose after being detached from their sport?
My biggest thing is your starting point. Since most of the time when you stop playing your sport and you're struggling hard with finding your identity, most of us are at rock bottom. Don't surround yourself with others who are at rock bottom. Because the more you try to grow, they may not, and they may hold you back more. Try to find people who are positive, who are motivating, who are actively working towards bettering themselves and finding their purpose, because even if you're not at the same pace that they might be because they're a few steps ahead, those types of people typically are the ones saying, here, get on my back. I'll carry you for a little bit to get you started. Like, I'll give you that push to get you going.
Love that, dude.
But whether that's someone that's like directly close to you, or someone that like maybe it's a motivational speaker, or maybe it's maybe it is like a huge influencer or something who has like a motivational personality or like a great work ethic to them, and you're just kind of following in the motions that they're doing. I'm not saying copy someone completely, but following in their footsteps, following in their motions just to get going.
Just implementing baby steps.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is such a huge thing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like your sport. Like, you don't just, learn all the skills when you're starting out. So I think as former athletes, as we leave with all these acquired skills from our sport, it's almost like we're having to restart to learn how to build a new endeavor and learn new skills.
And even one thing actually that I think is a good thing to mention for young athletes who are still in the sport now, like who are still identifying by their sport.
Absolutely.
The biggest thing here is pay attention beyond the surface. Pay attention beyond the actual game itself, because sports have a way of teaching you life lessons very early, and it's important to pick up on those. And things I wish I had paid attention to much earlier on and had paid attention to while I was still an athlete. Because as I went on, as I moved away from being a competitive athlete, I look back and go, there were lessons there that I realize now that I could have learned then if I was paying closer attention. Like when you get injured, when you're at like the height of your career, when you're performing your best, and it all just goes away in the snap of a finger, that, like, looking back, it's like, that was the first lesson that life doesn't work in your favor all the time.
That's a really good point, dude. Yeah.
I wish I had paid attention to that then, because it would have, I don't want to say prepared me for further disappointment later on, but it would prepare you to teach you how to deal with obstacles.
Well, and I even like the fact that we're talking about this. Hopefully, I have a little bit of a high school athlete following, but I hope they hear this part of the podcast, because, I mean, look at you. I mean, you had this situation happen and you're reflecting on it now. So even if they don't realize it at this point, they will at least learn later on, like, wow, I could transition that situation over to my adulthood, my post-sport life. But hopefully if they're listening to this, they give a little bit broader lens, or open up their eyes a little bit more on that lens of and scope of, hey, this is a situation that I can learn from. So, I mean, that's a really good point, man. I really like the fact that you said that.
I know I felt some of them are going to get to that point soon, whether it's through injury or whether it's just being cut or simply not being noticed for the next level and not getting that next step.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to hit them like a ton of bricks, and I feel for them. I do. But I hate to say that, you know what? Tough. When you learn things the hard way, it's going to help you grow.
It sticks with you more.
Yeah. You remember those lessons later on.
Yeah.
Not right away. It'll stick with you, and for the right people, it'll light a fire under you.
For sure.
Because even I took that lesson to the end of high school when I had a guidance counselor in grade 11 and 12 who, I don't know how he could even be a guidance counselor, really. He was that guy that I was applying to college, and there were certain colleges that were maybe a little bit out of my reach. And I was saying, hey, I'm applying to these colleges. And he goes, you're not getting in. You won't get into those.
Mm-hmm.
And that, holy hell, that pissed me off. It was like you saying that means I'm going to get in. Because now I'm going to.
That kind of open, yeah. But like, I mean, so, I was told things as an athlete where I couldn't do. And so that brings up the topic of, well, so now are you living in a state of delusion, or are you having a fire lit under your ass to where you're going to leap bounds and make it happen? So, I'm interested to see, did you get into that college that you applied for?
Yep.
You did?
There was one I got in late, due to other people just not sticking with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I got in.
And so, what was your feelings, when you got in? Like,
well, I mean, that wasn't the one I ended up going to do, but it was one of those things where someone told me I couldn't do something, and I did it.
Right.
And when you're told you can't play a sport anymore, even though, like, at that point I took it to heart and I didn't stick with that sport, just because I knew at that point, too, I didn't have the physical ability, but the next time someone told me I couldn't do something, I was damn well going to do it.
Yeah. I like I said, I've been told things that I can't do, and I don't know. Just the achiever mindset comes in when somebody tells me I can't do something. Now, of course, like, I mean, how do you balance the difference? Because, I mean, for people out there, like, there are some athletes out there that, have a chance to play college baseball, but I think they live in a state of delusion where they think they're going to prime time ACC, SEC. I mean, how do you relay that message to that kid, or how do you relay that message to those parents? I mean, like, that's just kind of I know this is kind of like off the cuff, but what are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. I had a couple guys that I used to train with when I was still a baseball player who, believe it or not, have made the pro ranks now.
Wow.
But it was a point where when I played, I had a coach who was super helpful and super inspirational, but would give you what you needed to hear straight.
Mm-hmm.
To the point of not to discourage, but to give you a dose of reality.
Sure.
Like, being motivated and having goals that you want to accomplish, that's great. Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some realities you're going to have to accept and deal with.
Sure.
Because there was a point where I was probably 9 or 10, and I kept saying to one of my coaches, I was like, I'm going to get drafted. Like, I'm going to stick it out with baseball. I'm going to get drafted. And it was actually a female coach. She goes, guess what? If you're going to get drafted, people would already be talking about you. So let's tone that back a bit.
Sure.
And I was like, why? A couple guys that I was training with, she goes, you see those guys? They're getting drafted. Because people already have their names in their mouth. They're already being noticed.
Right.
And it has nothing to do with how hard you work at this point. They have a natural ability plus work ethic. You might have work ethic, but they've got a natural ability that gave them a better start.
Sure.
And I'm a person who's like, you know what, but work ethic will always outdo natural talent because everyone's going to notice the guy who works harder.
For sure.
But when someone has a better foundational base just from their physical makeup or whatever, sometimes you just can't compete with it.
Right. Well,
and those guys drafted later, and I was like, shit. Reality really set in.
Sure. So, I mean, but, at the same token, I kind of just was thinking this, like, maybe it's a situation where you get realistic with where you are now, and then you debate, am I willing to sacrifice X amount of years to get to the point of where I'm saying I'm wanting to go? It's definitely going to be a process for that average player out there, that average, C player out there. So I definitely can relate with that. But Mike, I do want to ask you one more question, brother. If you had any best piece of advice for anyone listening, hopefully you're listening this far. This is the longest episode yet, but it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Mike, do you have any piece of advice that you would share with our former athletes that were listening?
Yeah, there's so many, but I'll dial it down to one. If you have a really big goal you're trying to accomplish, don't go after the big goal right away. There are steps to get you there. And look at it as accomplishing each step before getting to the big goal, because there is so many pieces to seeing that bigger picture and making that bigger picture a reality. And I'll give an example with the situation I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I have a goal of buying a piece of land, building a house, owning a truck, living down a dirt road somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not going to happen overnight, and that's not going to happen even in a year. I've wanted a truck since I got my license at 16. 9 years later, I'm 3 months away.
Yeah.
From owning a truck. Step one. That's step one. 9 years. Step one. It takes time.
What kind of truck?
Don't bite off more than you can chew right away.
Yeah, what kind of truck, Mike?
Right now it's going to be a Ford Ranger.
Yes.
I need, really.
I got curious.
I didn't put the size, but it's more the capabilities that a truck has over anything else.
Sure. Definitely the process there. I like the fact that you're saying the process.
Trust the process. Actually, I love that line. When I was working in junior hockey too, we had a coach for the junior hockey team that I used to talk to almost every day. I used to cover the team, and he always had the saying, trust the process. Mm-hmm. I finally got that one.
Yeah. So basically, have this big goal, reverse engineer it, break it down into steps, and implement the steps one by one.
And trust the process.
Trust the process. Awesome, dude. Well, Mike, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for taking the time to join the podcast. And guys, if you don't follow Mike on Instagram, please go ahead and do so. Mike, if you want to share that handle.
Yep, at Mike Larusso _OFC, all three. Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram. No more Facebook.
Yeah, I saw that YouTube video about that. So, guys, please go ahead and visit The Former Athlete Fitness on Instagram. There you will find a link in the bio, and you can buy our gear, tees, tanks, hoodies, all of the above. Also, we have a free Facebook community that you can join, free workouts inside, free support, just a uplifting community. And then, of course, we have our YouTube channel where we showcase our podcast. Guys, thank you so much for listening. And remember, your sport is over. Your purpose is not. You are made for more. Until next show.